Good morning, brothers and sisters. Father Ron here, breaking open the Word. And our gospel is from the 9th chapter of Mark, verse 35. Then Jesus called the 12 around and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." And then Jesus took a little child and set him among them and said, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." His papa, his father. Friends, my brother Mike, he lives in Birmingham, Alabama with his family, and Mike likes to cook. And he's a good cook, usually. But here's the thing, you'll never eat anything at Mike's place, at his table, and think, it's kind of bland. You'll never, ever say that because Mike's philosophy on seasoning food is simple. If it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. So if it's a teaspoon of garlic powder you're supposed to put in from the recipe, he'll put in a cup of it because more is better, right? And that works, a great philosophy if you're mixing drinks, but it's hit or miss when it comes to cooking. So I always tell Mike the same thing. When he's getting ready to season the food, I always tell him, remember, less is more. Less is more. And I know that phrase because friends tell me that all the time before I give my homilies. Less is more. Anyway, I believe that is what you call a paradox. A statement that seems contradictory, less is more, but actually expresses a deeper truth. Like fight fire with fire. Doesn't seem to make any sense. The beginning of the end, again, a paradox. The more I learn, the more I don't know. Or is that right? No, wait a minute. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know, or something like that. Anyway, in today's gospel, Jesus gives us another paradox that is at the very heart of the Christian life. Those who wish to be first must be last. Huh? Those who wish to be first must be last of all and servant of all. Yeah, doesn't make much sense. You know what it reminds me of? Many, many years ago, Mother Teresa had an interview, or Dan Rather on 60 Minutes interviewed Mother Teresa. And at one point, Dan Rather asks Mother Teresa, he says, "Wow, you're such a holy person. Everyone knows you as such. When you pray to God, what do you say?" And Mother Teresa says, "I don't say anything. I listen." And Dan Rather's like, well, then what does God say? And she says, he doesn't. God listens. You could see Dan Rather's face. He was like, what? Commercial break. Another paradox, I guess, if you will. Anyway, those who wish to be first must be last and servant of all. It's the bedrock of the Christian life, prioritizing the needs of others over my own needs. And when we do, we are elevated to greatness in the eyes of the only one who matters, God. You know, there is, in fact, a leadership style whose philosophy rests on just this principle. And it's called servant leadership. Maybe you've heard of it. A servant leader shares power, puts the needs of their constituents first, and then helps people develop and perform as highly as possible. Instead of the people working to serve the leader exists to serve the people. Servant leadership. And I always think of my founder, St. Vincent de Paul, as a beautiful example of this, of servant leadership, of what Jesus is telling us in the gospel today. St. Vincent de Paul, when he was a priest and moving into his life, he helped the poor. We know that. He's the patron saint of charity in the Catholic Church. And he went to prisons to help prisoners, but he didn't just go and say Mass. He went and shared the work with them and among them, in essence, becoming a prisoner himself. And only then could he share the good news. St. Vincent didn't just offer someone thoughts and prayers who was going through a rough time. Vincent went to their house and visited them to show his thought and his prayer, his care and love. St. Vincent, he didn't just feed the hungry, he sat down with them and listened to their story and their life. Servant leadership, others first, that personal experience. Or how about the greatest leader of all, the first among all leaders, Jesus himself? Throughout the entire world and all of history, it would be hard to find any individual whose life has had a greater impact than that of Jesus, right? So influential and so powerful Jesus was, and yet he never held political office. He never wrote a book, never invented something or discovered anything, never led an army into battle, never amassed great wealth. In fact, he never did any of the things that we typically think of in leaders and powerful, influential people. Now, like St. Vincent, who followed in Jesus' footsteps, Jesus became first and powerful and leader of all because of his care and concern for others first, and then himself. Less is more. The leader shall be the servant. These paradoxes, they're difficult concepts to understand in today's world, isn't it? Where, we see leaders as billionaires, or celebrities with millions of Instagram followers. Men and women who think different than most of us, that live differently, drive different cars, who fly in private jets. Not one among us, but above and beyond us. Even though in many cases, like Congress, that shouldn't be, but is. Well, as Christians, we look at the life of Jesus and so many other holy men and women who have followed him, who have literally changed the world, not because they were somebodies or wealthy or influential or powerful, but because they connected with people and cared for those who were their neighbors and friends, co-workers and classmates, who wanted to bring peace where there was division, healing where brokenness existed. They were the ones who sacrificed to bring comfort where there was sadness and love where there was hate. That is what made them greatest of all. And there's a word for people like that. No, it's not senator or president. It's not celebrity or influencer. The word is Christian. the greatest of all titles. So friends, let me end here by saying that this kind of servant leadership, it's not something that we have to learn to do, right? You don't need a book to learn about it or watch a movie. That's how we were created. You and I, we were created in the image and the likeness of the greatest servant leader of all. And so the more we strive to live our true selves in his likeness, well, the more too we become those leaders Jesus calls us to be. And that's why I love the example at the end there where Jesus grabs a child and places it in their midst and says, look, just be like this. And it makes sense, doesn't it? That's a great model for how our lives should be as leaders. Little children, they act the same way, whether they are in front of Taylor Swift or a beggar on the street. No difference. It's the person who is before them. They're as comfortable, little kids in coach as they are in first class. They're wailing in both cases. But little kids, they treat you the same whether you live in a trailer court or have 3 mansions in the Hamptons. They just know who they are and live from that place, not wanting to be something or someone else. That's little kids. And because of that simplicity and humility, we're all drawn to them. Aren't we? We see a kid, it's like, oh my gosh, our heart kind of melts, and the closer we get to her or him, the more a smile comes onto our face. There's something so pure and simple and beautiful. So this week, friends, put the books down. Turn off the Bible in a Year podcast. Walk away from EWTN and instead go visit your grandbabies. Hold them close and really watch them and learn what it means to be the greatest of all. And then when you start smelling something nasty, leave. Get out fast. All right, friends, thank you so much for being with me today. I hope your day is filled with blessing and beauty and love in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And we'll see you tomorrow for a new week.